Legends of Tomorrow, Episode 8, Night of the Hawk. I think they did a pretty good job with this episode, and with the way things ended, I finally kind of got something that I'm pretty sure they're going to be doing, and I'll kind of talk about that because it's like a big what-if sort of scenario, but I think this was a pretty fun episode. I love the fact that they went full on dealing with a bunch of random, bringing up racism and stuff a lot of different times. I thought that was actually pretty entertaining, but it was pretty cool seeing Vandal Savage as a character who wasn't like just a flat out bad guy. Like obviously he was doing like his secret villain thing where he was turning people into the like the hawk creatures because he was brought to the meteorite, but he had like built this life up for himself. So if it weren't for this meteorite, he wouldn't have been doing anything villainous. Like that's the I mean obviously that's why they were in that time, because that's kind of what brought attention to what was going on, because people just randomly started missing, and I'm assuming the meteorite would have at some point had to have kind of been outed. Something would have happened to that, like in the initial timeline. Some part of that must have gotten out, and that's how they were able to even get that information in the last episode. But they go back in time, and he's kind of like just this secret doctor who has, I mean, he already had this wing, technically, but it seemed like the only patients that were really there were like the Hawk characters. We didn't see like anything else. It was just a bunch of the Hawk people. So it was like, how do you have this entire wing for like, criminal characters, but they don't even bother showing any of that. We only see like Hawk, people that have been transformed. But I like the fact that he was in this episode, not as like the super villain guy or anything like that when they first find him. He's just the guy trying to blend in and do sort of little social experiments, whatever he was doing before, the meteorite and stuff happened. It's like he was just there in that city because he'd obviously been there long before the meteorite showed up. It wasn't just like it showed up and then poof, he's a doctor. So he'd established that life, kind of just living it out like normal. So when he shows up to Kendra and Ray's house, which is a really funny scene, especially with Ray's like, "You cannot love tuna sprout, oh my god," and he like just instantly broke, any sort of, well, I mean, he doesn't have any training, but he just broke any sort of rule of don't out yourself, even though he wouldn't know, because of course this was for Vandal Savage the first time he'd seen them as a team, so of course he didn't know. And I think what they did was pretty interesting because, of course, one of the big things with the show is like, how are they going to, constantly go up against Vandal Savage? Because at some point, they're going to either stop him or they won't stop him. And if they go back in time, they eventually have to just keep going back further and further. And I don't know if it would be too interesting if it's like, oh yeah, we got to go back to like 1802 or something like that. It would be very interesting to see. But I don't know if they're going to do it that way. They could. Actually, I think that would, at least for one episode, that would be very awesome if they did that. It was just like super old-timey and no technology whatsoever. And they're just like, every single thing that they would say would be so weird to everybody in the city because it's like none of those words are really said, like they were back then. So that might work for like an episode or two, but it's like at some point they either have to keep going back in time or kind of stick within a very specific time limit. And now that he's seen at least Kendra and Ray, because he didn't see anyone else during this episode, he only saw Kendra and Ray, so he knew that Kendra had her memories, and Ray of course shot him with like a laser cannon. So of course the two of them, if they went to like, I don't know what time span, I mean it was 1958, and I believe they did the 70s. And then when they did the Firestorm thing, I can't remember what year that was, but that was like somewhere in the 60s. So they'd have to find like a very short window. I think it's only like a 5 or 6 year window between the 1958 stuff and like the Russian Cold War stuff. So I don't know. It's like they would be jumping all over time, and they've kind of shown how they're going to separate that stuff for at least a couple episodes, because they did the Star City thing, and that wasn't Vandal Savage, and then they did the space thing after that in the last episode. And so we got back to Savage, and then the next episode, we're still going to be in 1958, so we'll probably see some of the characters we saw in this episode. We'll probably see the Betty character again. We'll probably see the nurse that Sarah was talking to, and possibly Betty's boyfriend. So we might get to see them again, and Ray, Kendra, and Sarah are gonna have to figure out, how the heck do we get out of this situation. But I'm still really curious. It's like every time that happens, I'm like, all right, well, they can't do that timeline anymore. If they go in the future, anytime in the future, he'll of course have instant measures to go up against them, and he's probably prepared at this point. Although he probably wouldn't, because they're jumping through time, he wouldn't always be 100% ready. But at some point, it's just like, all right, here you guys are again, and they're just gonna keep fighting him, and it's gonna be during this time or that time, but he'll be completely prepared to take everybody down. So I don't know if they'll be going back in time anymore or if they'll only be going forward, and eventually everything will be just leading up to Rip Hunter's present, which of course they have to stop him before that, but they can't, if they keep failing up to that point in the timeline. He said it himself, they aren't supposed to go back and alter stuff that they've already altered, so unless they defeat him, that's what's going to happen. Unless they do defeat him, and then I don't know. I guess they'd be taking on another villain. I never even consider who else they could take on because I don't really know any other immortals unless it was like here's Solomon Grundy, who's technically an Arrow, but not the same, and he's not exactly causing world chaos, so it's not really the same thing. But I'm excited to see where they're going. I enjoyed the action in this episode. That was pretty good towards the end, and we had some interesting, once again, character moments for the mostly for Snart. I think he had some stuff where we don't get to see exactly what happened, and of course the big thing with that is always, well, if they don't show the body, person's alive, and a lot of people had the theory that he probably just froze his legs or something so he couldn't get away, and we still don't know where in time that really was. It was somewhere, and it was like a little forest, and that was it. But I thought it was interesting that of all the people, because I thought it would have been Ray that would have been kind of doing, kind of talking to him like that, but it was actually Jack. So that surprised me a little bit. But I guess ultimately, either way, it kind of works out the same because Jack's like the youngest person on the team, so he probably has like the greatest sense of sort of the teamwork because he was on especially having been on the football team and everything. That was kind of how they introduced his character and why he chose to be a hero, because he realized I want to be a part of something more than just myself, and if it's being a superhero, it's like more than anything else, really. So it does make a lot of sense that he'd be the one to do that. Like, this guy was meant to be like your best friend and stuff, but you killed him, and then he, kind of came around by then, like, you did it to protect us and stuff. So I kind of like how that played out. I thought it was pretty well done. And I thought Stein and Sarah had some good moments too. Mostly Stein kind of telling her, like, you have to be careful, kind of getting this woman's hopes up and telling her about like this great future where she can be herself, because you're just gonna, we're gonna take off to this enlightened future, and she's stuck in 1958. And I thought that was pretty cool. And Sarah kind of had these feelings come up, and she mentioned that she was the one that freaked out and everything. And I like that. It was like, as she mentioned, after she'd come back from life or come back to life, she hadn't really gone through having emotions exactly. She was pretty much on a kill streak. That was pretty much how her character was going. And so in this episode, she kind of felt more than just anger, and she felt other emotions and how you could hurt someone or be hurt. So I really enjoyed that as well. It was a nice, addition. Kind of. It's hard to call it a development, but I guess technically that's what it is, because all those feelings were kind of driven out of her through the league, and then when she died and came back, she was totally different. So, it is technically development. It's kind of like her learning herself a little bit more all over again. So I thought that was actually really well done. And then we have the ending where Kronos shows up again. He's shooting the ship. He somehow got past, any sort of proximity warnings, anything like that. He's just, boom, he's right there, and he's shooting the ship. And I guess they don't have any proximity warnings because that happened before, and it's like, oh crap, there's Boba Fett. So he's just, he just shows up. It's like, you'd think the ship would have something like, hey, there's one single person that has like, you think Gideon would be able to sense like future technology or something, but he's always just like 10 feet from the ship, and he just starts blowing the thing up, and I'm like, there's like no defenses on this ship. So Kronos gets in. The team has to get to the backup ship, so they take off. I'm assuming Kronos takes over the ship, and they jump through time wherever, and then they don't get to the ship because in the promo, Snart is handcuffed and stuff, and they're flying through, and so of course that leaves Kendra, Ray, and Sarah just stuck in 1958 trying to figure out where do we go from here. So I'm very excited. The theory that came up, and as soon as it happened in this episode, as soon as Kronos showed up, it kind of hit me that I think Kronos is probably Rory. I think that, wherever they ended up leaving him, whatever Snart did, he left him there. And because, of course, we're dealing with people that can travel through time, if, you have a partner who is dropped off at any random place in time, and you have this giant group of people that can travel through time, they can follow you through time, and they can pick up this person who clearly in the last episode decided he didn't want to be a part of the team anymore, and so they pick him up and they let him go as a bounty hunter to chase down the people that he hates. And if he's, chasing, maybe it started off where he was chasing Rip through time, and that was to, try to avoid the entire thing in general. But Rip said that he knew who he was, so maybe that wasn't the plan to begin with. Maybe they picked him up, and it was like, I don't know. Like, it's hard to really consider how they could do it without it being a weird little paradox, because otherwise he would just go straight for the team, unless somehow one of the Time Lords, just wherever he was left, naturally found him. And so it's like in the initial timeline, he was always meant to be found wherever they left him. And then they save him and they take him to the future. Like, oh, you want to hunt down these people? Well, you can't do that this way because, that doesn't happen. Or maybe it's like it's not meant to happen this way or something crazy like that. So they train him as a bounty hunter through time. He builds his reputation, and then once everything kind of gets set off with Rip, that's when he's allowed to, go after the team. And I feel like that's what they're going to do, because they had this one scene after Start was like, what the hell is this? And then they did like the little slow motion turn, and then it cut away. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's going to end up being, it's going to be Mick. So as soon as he showed up, I was like, I think that's Mick now. Like, it just, as soon as he showed up again, I was like, I think that's who Kronos is going to be. Because there's always some sort of reveal. Whenever it's time travel, it always ends up being someone we already knew. Even though you don't think that, it's just like, oh, it's a time traveling bounty hunter. It's like, alright, that's who it is. And then something crazy happens, like, Mick possibly dying, but most likely not because they don't show it. And then it's like, who is behind that mask? Who is Kronos? And I think it's going to end up being Mick in this next episode, which I think would be a great twist. And they would have to explain it, because if it is Kronos, then he would have to be older than he was, when Snart, like, froze his legs or whatever he did to him. So it would kind of have to be how I explained it, where they say, like, oh, you can't go right after them because whatever. There's, like, and that's the thing, I don't think there would be a good enough reason. But maybe there would be, like, another Time Master if he was trapped, possibly, and Mick helped him or something crazy like that, and then he took him into the future, and then it's like, okay, we'll train you to do this, and then, that's when the Rip Hunter stuff happens, and maybe they didn't listen to him or something. I don't know. Like, I can't really think of how it would work, but I feel like there's some way to definitely make that work without it being a paradox. There's something in there they can do, and they could have just stopped him. It's like, okay, well, if this happens, simply we do have to train you. That could be the case, and they just built a name for this guy without him even really having done anything, because I think that would be really easy. They could easily just be like, hey, this is Kronos, he's a very high-ranking bounty hunter, but really it's just Mick, and it's like, we're going to train you to actually be able to stop them and do that. Even in that case, if they know what's going to happen, then they would have just, killed Rick off or Rip off, or just expelled him from the thing. So once again, could easily be wrong. There's a lot of ways for that to be a weird paradox, but I just feel like it's going to be mixed somehow. Maybe it's not, it was never, maybe Kronos found him or something, and maybe he killed Kronos. Who knows? Because he's a good fighter. Maybe he actually killed the actual Kronos and he just took the mask and stuff. That would be a very easy way to do it, where Kronos actually found them and, followed the trail again, because that's what keeps happening. Kronos finds them, and then they lose Kronos. And then if, he was found and maybe taken in by Kronos, and Kronos tried to torture him or something, like, where did they go and this and that, he could have easily just, broke free. He breaks free, he kills Kronos, and then he takes on the identity of Kronos in this most recent episode, and he travels through time now, and he's going to try to take out the team for revenge. So I still think it's going to be Mick. That's probably way more logical than the first explanation, because that's like a bunch of paradoxes come from that. and just because obviously it's all people from the future, so even if someone got trapped in the past, Mick could just be like, hey, Rip Hunter, he's going to screw up the timeline, and that's pretty much it. So I think it's going to end up being that he was captured by Kronos wherever he was left, and then he actually broke free and killed Kronos himself and just took the suit, and then he's, now chasing down the team through time, which I think would make a lot of sense. We don't need to see who Kronos is. I'm fine with him just being referenced to as Boba Fett, because that's awesome to me. But I think that's what's going to be happening. I'm definitely excited to find out. I think either way, we're going to see who Kronos is. It might not be Mick. It could be someone else that we've seen like maybe once or twice. It would be crazy if it was Rip's wife. That wouldn't even make sense to me. But I just feel like it's got to be someone that we know, and I think it's going to end up being Mick. But certainly enjoyed this episode. Of course, I can't finish this review without mentioning the fact that they did have Back to the Future references in this, which was very awesome because they mentioned Biff by name when Jax is in the diner when the two guys walk up to him. And then when he's dressed up, Ray's like, oh, are you going to the Enchantment Under the Sea dance? Both from Back to the Future. So that was very awesome. Really enjoyed that. Like, two little things. They just keep up with all the references. It's like Star Wars, Star Trek, Back to the Future. I'm sure they'll have something else. At some point, they have to do a Doctor Who reference, because I feel like all they're doing is like, alright, here's every sort of science fiction thing. They've finally gotten into time travel, because basically it's just been space stuff as far as references, so Star Wars and Star Trek. But they finally got to reference something that was actually about time travel. So they did Back to the Future. I feel like Doctor Who has to be coming up very soon, unless I missed a reference already, which I don't believe I did, but I'm not super into Doctor Who like I am in Back to the Future or Star Wars, so it's definitely possible I already missed one of the Doctor Who references, but I feel like that's coming up pretty soon if they haven't done one already. And they always go back to the Star Wars references, so I'm sure we'll get more Back to the Future stuff and a bunch of Doctor Who stuff if they haven't, even if they have done stuff already, I'm sure we'll get way more. But certainly enjoyed this episode. Sucks that it's going on break. I don't know why everything's going on break or what this weird like 3-week long break stuff is for some reason. I don't know why that's been happening with all the shows, but I'm excited for the show to come back. I believe, I want to say it's like, I don't think it's too much of a wait for this one, which I'm fine with. I highly doubt it, but it wouldn't even make sense. I highly doubt they're doing that for the DC shows, because Batman v Superman is coming out really soon, which is only in 2 weeks. I highly doubt it's for that, because CW is doing it across the board. Like, everything has been on break for like, if it hasn't been on break already, like Legends of Tomorrow, it went on break like 2 weeks ago, and it's like, alright, see you March 22nd. It did it in like February 22nd and stuff, and it was like, see you in a month. And now this is going to be off for like, I think 3 weeks, not a full month, but it's just weird. I don't know why it's doing that, but still excited for it to come back. Definitely want to know what you guys thought about this episode though, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And I mentioned my theory on who I think Kronos is and why I think it's Mick. I definitely want to know if you guys think it's Mick, if you think it might be, someone else that we know from either the shows or maybe just comics in general. Maybe it's just a character that you think would perfectly fit into, this sort of time travel type story. So I definitely want to know your theories on who you think Kronos is, whether you think it's Mick or not, or anything like that. Just who do you think Kronos is? Because I feel like whether it's Mick or not, with the way they did it, and we have a couple of team members trapped with Kronos, it has to be a reveal in the next episode, or at least something where we, even if they don't show who it is, they'll say something and it'll give us a hint whether it's a person we know or just a reference to someone else who's already in the comic universe. So definitely want to know who you guys think Kronos is, and of course what you guys thought about this episode in general. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.